Bonjour, and welcome to a new Paris Top Tips video. In this series where I take you to discover the most beautiful neighborhoods of Paris, follow me today on the Île de la Cité, and let's discover the roots of Paris. The Île de la Cité, in English City Island, is an island in the river Seine, in the center of Paris. Birthplace of Paris, it was in the 4th century the site of the fortress of the Roman governor, and in the year 508 Clovis, the first king of the Franks, established his palace on the island. We are going to cover the entire island, starting from the Latin Quarter and ending towards the Halles neighborhood. As usual, this map is available for you following the link in the description. We start our stroll in the Latin Quarter at the Maubert Mutualité station on Metro Line 10. This street, Rue de Bièvre, was at one time a little famous, since it was here that President François Mitterrand lived rather than at the Élysée Palace. Do not hesitate to stop for a few moments to search the stalls of the Booksellers of Paris. In a year from now, when the reconstruction of Notre-Dame is finished, the view will be awesome again from here. At the southeastern tip of the Île de la Cité, our first visit will be to the memorial to the Martyrs of the Deportation. The entrance is free. This is a memorial to the 200,000 people who were sent to Nazi concentration camps during World War II. It is a deliberately stark and simple place, composed of a triangular courtyard giving access to a crypt and a corridor. At the entrance of the crypt is the tomb of an unknown deportee who was killed at the camp in Neustadt. And, along both walls of the small chamber behind, are 200,000 glass crystals with light shining through, meant to symbolize each of the deportees who died in the concentration camps. In this room, the wall facing the entrance presents all the Nazi concentration camps. And on the opposite wall, the number of deportees in each French department. My grandfather was one of the 1033 deportees from Haze. Railroad worker and resistance fighter, he died in Auschwitz. The long and narrow subterranean corridors are meant to convey a feeling of claustrophobia. Along these corridors, there are explanations of the Nazi concentration camp system and those who were its victims. The convoy of the 31,000 was a deportation convoy that left France for Auschwitz in 1943. The women who were transported were mostly Communist Party members or resistance fighters. They were assigned numbers between 31,000 and 32,000 when they arrived in Auschwitz. Only one woman out of 5 survived. Let's continue our stroll and reach Notre-Dame Cathedral through the old medieval streets of the island. Yes, in Paris there are also horse-mounted police agents. All around the cathedral, if you want to find souvenirs to bring back, there are many shops. If this building looks medieval, it was actually built in 1958. This restaurant has been here since the 16th century. And here we are at Notre-Dame Cathedral, well, at its construction site rather, surrounded by palisades giving plenty of information on the fire of April the 15th, 2019. Notre-Dame will be rebuilt by the end of 2024. In the meantime, here are some images of the 2019 fire, as well as others filmed in 2017, sorry, not in 4K, of the cathedral and its interior. If you come to Paris when it's open again, the cathedral is an absolute must-see. With 12 million visitors in 2017, it was the most visited monument in Paris, and I'm sure it will be again in 2025. The Archeological Crypt of the Ile de la Cité is a museum located just under the forecourt of Notre-Dame Cathedral. The site presents archaeological remains from antiquity to the 19th century. This building is the headquarters of the Parisian police. Let's go now to the Sainte-Chapelle. This is the place of the Marché aux Fleurs Reine Elisabeth II, Queen Elizabeth II flower market, but it's closed for renovation until 2025. Well, here is the Sainte-Chapelle. For me, but I'm chauvinistic, it's the most beautiful church in the world. The entrance fee is €11.50 for anyone above 18 years old, and it's free for children. Priority access is given to visitors with a ticket purchased on the internet, with reservation of a time slot. You enter the Sainte-Chapelle through the Lower Chapelle. The Lower Chapelle is only 6.6 meters high or 22 feet, with a 6 meter wide central vessel and two narrow side aisles. The primary decorative themes of the sculpture, columns and murals are the fleur de lis, emblem of the French royalty. The upper chapelle, the true gem of the Sainte-Chapelle, is reached by narrow stairways in the right tower. So, am I chauvinistic, or do you agree it's pure wonder? The most striking features are the walls, which appear to be almost entirely made of stained glass, which color is changing with the weather outside. There is a total of 670 square meters, or 7,200 square feet of glass, not even counting the rose window at the west end. This rose window is a very fine example of the flamboyant Gothic style. It is 9 meters in diameter and is composed of 89 separate panels representing scenes of the apocalypse. The thousands of small pieces of glass turn the walls into great screens of colored light, largely deep blues and reds, which gradually change in intensity from hour to hour. Sainte-Chapelle, as both a symbol of religion and royalty, was a prime target for vandalism during the French Revolution. The chapel was turned into a storehouse for grain, and the sculpture and royal emblems on the exterior were smashed. The sacred relics were dispersed, although some survive as the relics of Sainte-Chapelle in the treasury of Notre-Dame de Paris, and they even survived the 2019 fire. In 1840, under King Louis-Philippe, a long campaign of restoration began. The work continued for 28 years, and the results are faithful to the original drawings and descriptions of the chapel that survived. Today, Sainte-Chapelle is no longer a church. It was secularized after the French Revolution, which ended state religion. Here were held the most sacred Christian relics: the crown of thorns worn by Christ during his passion, a nail and a small piece of the cross on which he was crucified. Another flight of steps bring you back to the Lower Chapelle. The lower chapel is very beautiful, but it suffers from comparison with the one just above. Don't forget, you have to book so you don't have to queue, and if possible, come when the weather is nice outside, so that the colors are the most beautiful inside. Let's pass again in front of the entrance to the Sainte-Chapelle to reach the Quai des Orfèvres. Rather than staying on the Quai des Orfèvres, let's go down for a short stroll along the water's edge. The Pont Neuf, which means New Bridge, is, in fact, the oldest bridge in Paris, built in 1607. At the northwestern tip of the Ile de la Cité is the square du Vert-Galant. But rather than going to the garden, I advise you to stay at the water's edge and reach my favorite picnic spot in all Paris. Here, behind the branches of the weeping willow. Isn't it a great spot? But don't go with young children, it would be dangerous for them. The view is magnificent on the Pont des Arts and on the Louvre. With children, it is better to go to the garden. You will find plenty of benches in the shade. This is where the Vedette du Pont Neuf cruises start. Now, back to street level. This is King Henry IV, one of the most beloved kings of France, who made the Pont Neuf built. Isn't Paris a fabulous place to be? Now we're heading to Place Dauphine. Along with Place des Vosges, Place des Victoires, Place Vendôme and Place de la Concorde, Place Dauphine is one of the city's 5 royal squares. On the other side of the square, the Justice Hall. With the departures of the kings of France to the Louvre and then to Versailles, the old royal palace gradually was transformed into the judicial center of the kingdom, containing the courts, administrative offices and a prison, the Conciergerie. The Conciergerie, a former courthouse and prison located below the Palais de Justice, was originally part of the former royal palace, the Palais de la Cité, which also included the Sainte-Chapelle. Built by Hugues Capet in the 10th century, the Palais de la Cité was the residence of the kings of France until the 14th century, when the Louvre was created. This hall, the Hall of the Men-at-Arms, Salle des Gendarmes, was built in the early 14th century by Philip IV on the ground floor. Its great size, 61 meters long, 28 meters wide and 9 meters high to the vault, makes it the largest non-religious medieval hall in Europe. The usual museum shop separates the medieval and revolutionary parts of the Conciergerie. During the French Revolution, 2,780 prisoners, including Queen Marie-Antoinette, were imprisoned, tried and sentenced at the Conciergerie, then sent to different sites to be executed by the guillotine. A small number of wealthy prisoners were able to bribe guards to have cells with folding beds. These prisoners could send and receive mail, have their clothes watched, and sometimes have visitors. But as they had to pay for a month and would most often be guillotined after a few days, and then be replaced, guards here were working at the most lucrative furnished lodgings in Paris. The Hall of Names has walls covered with the names of more than 4,000 persons who were tried by the Revolutionary Tribunal. Names in red mean that the person was sentenced to death. Poorer prisoners were confined in collective cells on the lowest level, with straw-covered floors. These prisoners were called paillots, or straw sleepers. The museum offers a very interesting notepad, which allows you to visualize the places at different times in history. The terror times were the worst following the revolution. A tremendous lot of public executions took place on accusations of treason by the Committee of Public Safety. Robespierre, the main political leader during this dreadful era, finished terrorized and got a taste of his own medicine. Here was the cell of Queen Marie-Antoinette, where she stayed for 6 months before being executed. Back on the medieval part, let's visit the 14th century kitchen pavilion. You could cook an entire ox in this chimney. On the external wall of the Conciergerie, this clock was installed during the reigns of Charles VI in the 14th century and was the first public clock in Paris. From the bridge, you have a great view on the Conciergerie. This is where we end our walk. I hope you enjoyed it and that it can inspire you on your next visit to Paris.